And for anybody joining from afar on Zoom, it is a cloudy, overcast day here in Alfred, but the snow is melting, and so we're very grateful for that. A couple of quick announcements first. For anybody who is grabbing a paper copy of the schedule, I do want to turn your attention to the bottom of page 2, where you'll find a QR code for the Zoom link for any weeks that you are not going to be planning to attend in person. And then also on the other side of the page, there is a QR code for the Bergren Forums YouTube channel, where a number of older Bergren forums are currently stored, and so you'll be able to find those there. Also, as the semester goes on, we're going to kind of be increasing a little bit the amount of cameras that are in here and kind of slowly building towards a little bit more extensive production of the Bergren Forum. My last announcement is that tomorrow will be the opening reception for the Robert C. Turner Gallery, and starting tomorrow until February 6th will be Emily Wu's Yellow Peril. And so that will be opening up tomorrow. The opening reception will be 6 p.m. till 8 p.m. I'll now get out of the way and turn over to my colleague, Tim Nichols.
Thank you, John. My appreciation to John for putting this together, and particularly for our esteemed panel. I'm going to just quickly introduce them to you, but before I do, I'll mention that we roughly have about 12 school districts that we most frequently work with in the education division, and who host our students and sometimes hire our graduates and so forth. But by whatever circumstance, John really landed on the 5 that we work most frequently with. So we're deeply indebted to them for always opening their doors and their classrooms to our candidates to come in and observe and student teach and to learn such valuable lessons along the way. So my thanks to all of you. Let me just quickly introduce our panel here. I've got them alphabetical, but maybe, well, anyway, first of all, Morgan Allison down here is from Hornell. She's the Hornell High School principal, and Morgan did her undergrad and graduate work at SUNY Geneseo. Next, Aaron Brubaker in the middle here is the Wellsville High School principal. This is his first year in the position. Aaron has attended multiple colleges, SUNY Geneseo, Grand Canyon University, has a master's in special education, and then has done his advanced district leadership certification at the U of R. Peter Reynolds from Canisteo-Greenwood down on the end here is the principal there. He did both his undergrad and grad at St. Bonaventure with advanced certification, and is attending the Warner School at U of R for his school leadership certification. Dr. Melissa Rivers right here, 2 down, is the secondary principal at Alfred-Almond, our closest neighbor and partner here. She has a PhD in curriculum and instruction from Arizona State. And then lastly, Molly Turner is the principal at Andover. She went to St. Bonaventure undergrad and did her graduate degree at Alfred. So she's one of our own here. And then has done advanced certification at SUNY Stony Brook. So we have put together 5 questions that if there's time, we're going to ask. I'll read the question, let them jump in and give their thoughts on that. I'm going to try to pause in time, though, at the end, however many questions we've gotten through, to give you folks a little bit of a chance to interact with them and ask any questions as well. All right. So our first question for our panel is, what should universities know about the current and future generations of high school graduates that are headed our way? What are their unique challenges, experiences, limitations, and strengths? So I'll let you all jump in any order that you like.
Thanks, Molly. That was really kind. Yeah. Tim's automatically rethinking using the word esteemed in his introduction. I'm just the guy that's dumb enough to say I'll go first. So I'm going to break it down. Unique experiences and challenges. So first of all, the youth have a dramatic shift in social experiences from what we, and when I say we, I would refer to the panel, current educators, and likely even college students in the audience have had. So that provides us with a lot of context for what's going on. I would contend that the pandemic and experiencing the pandemic at a young age is a unique experience and challenge as well that I think really shapes what we're seeing right now and will see in future cohorts. Ubiquitous technology in your lives. Kids these days are digital natives. No one up here is a digital native. And that makes a huge difference in how we relate to the current digital infrastructure, the current digital space, as well as how our students relate to that and how we relate to our students because of the conflicts that that sometimes generates. And I would contend also that a unique experience or challenge that kids these days are facing is the increasingly polarized society that we're growing up in, as well as the fact that there seems to be an increasingly lack of acceptance or existence of objective fact, right? So I think what all this does is set up a tension or a dissonance between the past, which is very much where academia and education typically resides, and the future and the present, which are very much moving targets. So I think what we see is that in terms of strengths, youth today are able and willing to be quick adopters and adapters to new technology, new change. Certainly much more than me. I've never used Uber. I've never used Uber Eats. Probably never will, right? But I guarantee all of my students have because we're processing those deliveries at our main entrance. You know, our kids have unparalleled access to an infinite volume of information. And that is at its surface level of strength that we did not have. And they're able to shift their focus and attention incredibly rapidly. The youth are acculturated and conditioned to be able to transition from tasks or transition from points of focus incredibly quickly, much more quickly than I can. And they have access to people from a myriad of diverse places that were well beyond my reach growing up. And I would contend well beyond the reach of most of the panel growing up and most of the educators here for the college. Those bring with them some limitations, right? Access to information is not the same thing as having the ability to curate or discern in an intelligent manner. I would contend that the ubiquitous presence of technology in their lives makes them more susceptible to the algorithm and the influence and impacts of the algorithms. I think we have to be careful about that. I would also say that there's a vast body of research out there psychologically that talks about the impact of interruption on cognitive function. And I would say one of the dissonances or tensions between academia and the present and the future is that we grew up largely, and again, I'm referring to panels and educators, when information and tasks required long sustained focus. And we instruct or try and educate in ways that are beholden to the traditions that we grew up in, requiring students oftentimes to demonstrate long sustained focus. That's not how they're engaging with information. That's not how they're acculturated. That's not what they've practiced by the time that they get to us. And we may need to accept the fact that moving forward, those may be traits that are no longer selected for by the labor market, the employment market, right? The future. So I think like that's pretty good snapshot of where I'm at with that question. I'm just going to pass the mic and shut up.
I can't compete with what he just said. I agree with a lot of what Pete is saying. I think that one of the biggest limitations our students face, and maybe this is on us as educators, is that they are digital natives, but that we wrongly assume they know how to digitally navigate that world. You know, so they've been exposed to all of this their entire lives, but that doesn't mean they understand it. You know, we make this assumption that because they've been raised with computers that they know how to use them. You know, simple skills like typing, it's not there. You've probably seen lots of kids, and maybe some of you do it too. Your two fingers are typing. They have a cell phone on their hand, but that doesn't mean they understand what's at their disposal. And, you know, I think as educators, we're constantly reflecting on, okay, their strength is that they know this technology, but their limitation is they don't necessarily know how to work with that technology. And, you know, I think that they're being raised, you know, with a cell phone in their hand, and they truly don't know what it's like to be distraction free. You know, we were raised without those. You know, I still pick on our librarian, like, bring back that card catalog. I miss that thing, you know, that some of that, and they have no idea what we're talking about. So they truly don't know any difference. And it's our job to teach them to separate themselves from the technology. And then when they're using it, to use it appropriately and to not assume that they know these things, because they truly don't.
as we move forward here, there's less and less for us to say going down the road because it's it's already been said. But I know at Wellsville, one of the key things that we've really honed in this year in particular is this concept of resilience, which we heard a little bit about. That's probably one of the biggest things that we've really dialed in on is something that's inhibiting a lot of things, because that all of the examples we've heard kind of go back to the lack of the ability that we're seeing. And then for those of you that are going to go out and be educators, to be really cognizant of and weave this into your practice, that that lack of resilience means that they're going to have to, students at whatever age that they're at, need to learn how to be more resilient, taking criticisms as constructively rather than taking it and internalizing it into a place where it means that I'm a bad person, when that's not at all what it is. So it's just a very dynamic shifting thing with respect to that, and in terms of a strength, I mean, they're very good at being totally paperless. I do use Uber occasionally when I'm out in places that it exists, and it is coming to Wellsville. I'm not at Uber Eats yet. That just makes me feel a little bit queasy. I don't know if I can get over that. But it's there, so there are some good things there. We're, iPad based, and finding that we need to get kids back into laptop based, where you actually have to navigate through, like drives and saving things properly, because I'm not sure what everybody uses, but kids realize that if you're using a Windows-based device and you just close it, it may not be there the next time. I mean, it's just a simple example when you go back there, because, everything Google and iPad just seems to say for themselves. So, there's always some downsides to those pieces as well, but just, you gotta be very flexible and be ready for any turn that's going to be coming their way with these types of learning, experiences and the way they take them when they're coming. So.
Hard to really add anything new, but again, the algorithm is something important to think about. Again, they have access to everything in the world within a matter of seconds. If they have to wait more than 5 seconds, it's, oh my gosh, this is taking so long. But that doesn't mean they know how to discern that information and find out what is actually factual and not factual. It's just, that's what they've been assessing or accessing rather, and the algorithm picks up what they want. They want to look at a pair of shoes, and the next thing you know, you have 25 ads for shoes on all of your social media. It's, again, the assumption that they know how to use technology. So when they come into your classrooms, is making sure they know how to use the platform that you're utilizing, because it may be a completely different platform than they had in school. Our seniors right now were freshmen during the pandemic. Our second and third graders are now 5th, 6th, 7th graders. They lost a whole lot of learning how to read, and not just read, but being able to understand in a very different way than what all of us learned how to read. So being explicit about academic language and making sure that they understand how to use that language. We've just last week and this week, we're doing computer-based testing for our 3 through 8 students for simulation for the spring exams. The tests in science are completely different. It's not spitting back information. It's they're reading paragraphs and have to be able to discern what they're reading and then be able to have a cognizant response to it. It's not just saying H2O is hydrogen 2 and oxygen 1. That's not what tests are looking for. It's a big shift. Science is being changed. It's great, absolutely. But that means the lecture-based format is not going to be helpful for students because they have a 30 to 60-second attention span. Within 5 minutes, look around and see how many of your colleagues are on their computers or looking at their cell phones. We as adults have trouble with it. So thinking that, as Pete said, teaching the way that we were taught is not good enough anymore. We have to actually evolve just like our students have. Every year there's a survey that comes out. What is it that our current freshmen learned or did not learn that we learned? Those are important things to think about in shifting our teaching from just purely lecture to doing some hands-on, doing more than expecting them to be able to read for understanding, because again, they learned how to read differently. And we have to help them no matter what level they're at, whether they're our second graders, our ninth graders, or whether they're your graduate students.
All right. Really set myself up for, all right, I'm going to put together everything you said. So I'm going to. So in my response, I said, you know, institutional change, especially here in high schools, in colleges, takes forever. You know, institutional change takes a really long time. And so from my perspective, it's that our current generation of students work smarter, not harder. I have the answer. This is the answer. I don't need to show you all the steps that I took to get here. Like the process is really difficult. Why do I have to do it that way when I know exactly what it is that I'm going to answer? This is the correct answer. Why do I have to do all the things in between? So we see a lot of that. It's why are we asking them to show us the old way when they can get on the computer and the information is there for them and they can process it and summarize it and tell you like it is. We don't have to have them rewrite what that is in a, you know, long explanation. Our vocational schools are thriving because kids can get their hands dirty. You know, our juniors and seniors, especially at Andover, I can say, you know, the place is very quiet during the day because more than half of our classes are going to get their hands dirty in something that they really want to do. And I think that by coming to universities or four-year schools, we're asking them to take, you know, core classes that everybody has to take to, you know, get through. And by maybe your third or fourth year, you're doing the thing that you want to do. We need to get them interested and working within the coursework of their chosen whether it be education. We need to get kids in schools faster, freshman year, sophomore year, not student teaching. That's not it. They need more experiential learning to be able to get out of the program what they need. So by asking them to take classes that they've already taken in high school, oh, we've got to take this basic math or this basic English again. I've proven to you that I am here, that I did that in high school. Why am I having to do that again? I'd really like to learn about this. So I think that we need to rethink what it means to be successful as well. And those standardized tests being the key marker of success is no longer really something that is realistic. It's just what we've always done. So how can we continue to give students hands-on experiences, interesting experiences that expand their mind, but also their interests? Because right now, continuing to regurgitate the same thing for the same test that we've all taken 30, 40 years ago, it's the same thing. That's not proof that our kids know what they know. That doesn't back their interests. So I think that we really need to think about how we provide them more experiences in the area of interest earlier. I think you're going to find more success there.
Hey, great. Thank you so much. This is our second question. What kind of impact does our current vitriolic political climate, for example, book bans, attempting to script teachers, school controversies, fallout from the pandemic, don't say gay politicians, et cetera, having on our local schools here in our region?
I will say from my perspective that is not a lot of what I see during the day. I'm thankful that those types of scenarios in my small district are not something that overwhelm the kids or that are constantly, you know, on the plate of our board or on the plate of the students in our district. So I know, you know, I turn on the news, I read all about what's going on at board meetings around the country and things that are going on in other states, and it's absolutely terrible. I just, at this particular juncture, I know that is not necessarily something that is having a big impact on the day-to-day operations of my building.
While I agree that it doesn't have a big impact on day-to-day operations, at board meetings, it becomes an adult issue and not a kid issue. In terms of scripting teachers, that's been taking place for the last 50 years. So it's nothing new in terms of books, reading series, whatever. Making sure that you're doing things with fidelity is always a good thing from a research standpoint. But I don't see our teachers regurgitating, here's what we have to do on day one. We are reading the vocabulary. We're going through the vocabulary. Now we're going to shift into the reading portion. That doesn't happen. At least in I know in our schools. COVID fallout is again, we're going back to algorithms where they're getting information from both home and on their devices. And in terms of where you see it in school it's the ability to understand different perspectives can be a challenge. But are there rumbles in school and factions of kids? No. Kids are kids and they've always had opinions that are differing from one another. It's how we handle it as adults. Do we have to publicize everything that happens? No, the media does that for us, and it's much worse than it really actually is.
That was very good and very little to say. This will be quick. There's pockets of these things that happen at Wellsville here and there. Again, more so probably before the pandemic for some of these types of issues than now even. It turns out that the students are pretty resilient. When I mentioned resilient, one thing that they are very resilient at is being accepting of some of these things. And it does in a lot of cases seem to, we take a look at a specific thing. Is this bothering the adults in this situation? And that could be the parents, that could be, staff members and teachers or others, or is it bothering the kids? And that's where we reflect on it and say, well, really, who is this bothering and who matters in this case? But in terms of big problems where we're having, board meetings full of, these types of things, we just are not having that happen. Other areas of the country are, but we're very thankful based on the area we live in that we're doing pretty well in this regard. So.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we haven't had any big explosions in our board meetings, but I'd be remiss to say that it's not there. This is all there. There's an undercurrent of it. And, I think our area is unique because while we live in a liberal state, we do not live in a liberal region of the state. There are a lot of conservative forces that do pop up and try to push some rhetoric out there. But a lot of it, I think, is based on misinformation. So sometimes we'll get stirrings that something's going to happen at a board meeting. It hasn't yet. I think the biggest area that we've seen it in our district is the amount of parents who are pulling their children to go homeschool. Sometimes they will reach out and say it's because they have a fundamental disagreement with, the state's framework or what NICET is pushing in our curriculums. But truly, in most of these cases, they haven't really looked at it and they're basing it off of what they assume we're teaching. And when you talk to those angry parents and you try to tell them that's really not what we're teaching, that's not how we're teaching, they've already decided that that's their perception of what we're doing. And sometimes that's just a mindset that you can't argue otherwise. So we have seen a lot of students going homeschool. And then eventually, at least at the secondary level, they come back and you can see where that disservice has been done because they are behind. At the secondary level, it's really hard to homeschool. You really have to be an expert in a lot of subject areas, and parents might be in some of them. But even as an educator, I could not homeschool my children. I couldn't teach them the subject areas that I don't have the background in. And so, when they do come back to public education, I think that's where we see it most. So I think at the end of the day, that becomes our job even more to expose our students to the world and to different ideas, especially in rural Western New York. I grew up here. I grew up at Almond, and I was lucky enough to have parents who exposed me to the world to get out. But we have a lot of kids here who, for socioeconomic reasons, won't leave this region. And so that becomes our job to share ideas and share current events and share what's happening in the world so that they are exposed to it, even if they never leave us.
Yeah, I would echo and reinforce, I think, largely every point that my colleagues have made. I would make two additional brief points for you guys to consider. First, at its most basic level, I would say that the attention that the national media puts on the vitriol at least makes dehumanizing speech and actions more frequent in occurrence and seemingly more socially acceptable, which I think we need to be on guard about. The second point that I would make also is that the the fight at a school board meeting is a powerful and intoxicating distraction from meaningful or substantial change to a political system on the national level. Right. So it's a great tool to get people to focus on something much smaller than decisions like Citizens United or meaningful campaign finance reform. And so I would say that it is largely a symptom or a set of symptoms that speak more to the nature or the current health of the republic than the educational system.
Just to add, as far as classes go, so again, I'm going back to those Regents examinations. Okay, you've got to take your global and you've got to take your American history, but participation in government is a half a year class. Economics, half a year class. If we are looking to have engaged citizens and citizens who understand what they're walking into, we're a little backwards here, right? Participation in government. Students should be able to leave knowing their rights, knowing the political climate, knowing what's going on, knowing how to make positive decisions for not only themselves, but their community. And that is a half a year class. Okay. So those types of changes need to be made.
That's a great point. I agree with that. Thank you. Here's our next question, and this in some ways visits something that Molly said on the first question. Are there ways that Alfred University could work together with local high schools to make the secondary, tertiary educational experience more seamless for our students?
Thank you so much, Molly. I appreciate that. I think that we are working towards that. I know that Alfred-Almond and Andover have been working with admissions and talking about dual enrollment opportunities for students, and are they accessible for all students or just certain pockets of students? I think all universities can work with high schools to help them better understand the process. Going in and say, why AU? Sometimes it's hard for a student who graduates from their hometown university school to go there. I want to get away. Well, how is AU getting away from 2 minutes down the street? And those are things that they've always existed. So it's probably working with schools on, number one, why is college something that they should do? Because as Molly shared, students want to get their hands dirty. I have a niece that's a sophomore at Stony Brook, and she still is yet to take an astronomy course, and she's an astronomy major. It's because of how requirements are set up. So if a student is looking at the program of study and says, I'm not going to get into a ceramics class until, my third semester, why would they want to go right into college? So thinking about those types of things, how are you going to reframe how you set up the experiences? It's great to have wonderful dorms and great programs for kids, but how are you shifting things in the classroom? If our students come and do a visit, are they just going to see somebody in a lecture hall with 100 other people and lecturing for 2 hours? That's not going to excite students to come to university. It doesn't matter what university. It'll excite some, but it's not going to bring in the masses. So helping shift those types of things. And if you aren't doing huge lectures, make sure that kids know those types of things. And having students come to your campus, make sure they're going into the labs and seeing what research opportunities, because I know you do research opportunities with freshmen. Those exist, but those are the things that need to be sold to kids rather than going to a big lecture hall.
Being in the middle makes me a real big coattail rider today, but so yeah, I'll get to I can do that. So the thing that, just a fact that is a fact is when we look at the junior and senior high school students, half of them right now are taking the vocationals. they're going to the BOCES CTE Center, more than half of the juniors. And that means, we really start looking at, even to the point, and, you may not like hearing this, Tim, but, to what degree do we even try to push the college experience if it's not what they need? And it becomes more of a, like a business decision, and we really need to make it worth their while and really market it to them. And then, when you get them here, make it interesting and hit exactly those needs that they have, because it's getting harder and harder. Back when I was leaving high school, it was just, so everybody's going to go to college, or most of them pretty much. And the vocational thing was almost frowned upon. Well, that's different these days. And in a lot of ways, and rightfully so, where the, kids are able to go out and take a few months of some type of a vocational craft where they've already got a certificate and start making, more than us on stage in some cases, and without the debt, so it really, to make that more seamless is going to mean really reflecting if at the college level for the purpose, we've kind of said these things already, what do they need and how are we going to meet those needs more quickly and more acutely, and not push the full Monty of the things they don't need, because they're just not interested in coming as much, and it's going to be harder to maintain those types of things.
I'm in your position. They've already said most of it. I agree. Hornell's the same way. The majority of or over 50% of our juniors and seniors are on the BOCES campus for vocational skills. And I think that the reason is it's not that they are opposed to staying in our classrooms. They're consumers. We have to get them in. And we joke around about this at the high school. Don't name the class that, name it something fun, because they'll sign up. Like, it's the exact same content, but they're consumers. You've got to catch their attention. You've got to give them something that sparks their interest. And I don't think that changes by the time they get to the college level. And I think that they're also recognizing that same thing as, wait, let me do the math here. And I don't think Alfred's probably going to get rid of tuition costs anytime soon. So, they're starting to be smarter about it. Like, how much is this going to cost me? And I'm going to pay for this until I'm how old, or I can go do an apprenticeship and get into a union and be protected and make a lot of money. I think that they're starting to weigh out those things and recognizing either way, both are very important, but for us, we're realizing that the shift over what we're seeing in our area over the past 20 years is the majority of our kids just aren't college bound. They're vocation bound, or they start and then they just can't do it. They're withdrawing. We just had one of our students come into the building yesterday, and I asked him how school was going, and he said, yeah, I'm just going to get a job. I'm just getting a job now. I said, why? He goes, I just couldn't do it. He goes, I don't think the classroom's for me. And so now he's just going into employment. And I asked him, do you think you're going to just maybe save some money up and go back? And he said, no, I don't think I'm ever going to go back. So I think that and I think this is on us too, is doing a better job of helping our high schoolers hone in on the skills and their interests to make sure that we're putting them, we're driving them towards the right career path. And so I think that falls on us, but it also falls on universities as well.
Yeah, I don't know if I have too much to add to what's already been said, other than the fact that I think at one point in time, colleges and universities were concentrations of highly specialized knowledge and skills. And I would contend that today's high school students have unparalleled access to open source courses for those same highly specialized skills and knowledges. So to run with the business analogy, you really got to rethink your market, right? And the other thing I would say is my personal experience with colleges and universities is we love to be gatekeepers, right? Academia has this aspect to it that is largely clubbish. And I would say that if we're really concerned with shifting from an educational model that emphasizes the obtainment of facts to the engagement of critically thinking minds, then we need to abandon and really strip away any aspects of that gatekeeping, clubbish, cliquish model or the vestiges of those things.
Thank you all. I'm going to throw out one last question. Let's kind of do it quickly because I'd like to leave about 10 minutes for Q&A with the audience here. So what thought you have on this? It seems as if an ever increasing number of students are coming to us with various accommodations and needs for academic assistance. And we have a pretty vibrant program to help with that. But what is that going to mean for future educational standards, both at the university level and for students' future experience with the employment market?
So I'll hit this one real quick. I think that it's likely that our employment sectors are going to change so rapidly and dramatically over the next 5 to 10 years that this question is actually really difficult to answer. I think we've got the context wrong if we're focusing on the students and not focusing on the changes in the employment sector, right? Learning needs accommodations, they're typically contextualized in a model of education and a job market that's just not going to be sustainable or present for when these students hit the job market. The impact of AI and automation is greatly going to accelerate the rates at which we have to deal with this. So I really think that if this is where higher education is stuck, they need to reframe the question and look forward, not backwards to high school and kids coming up.
That's good. I would argue that we do have a lot of kids who require special accommodations, but I would say that maybe they've always been there. We're just better at identifying it. And for a lot of our students, the things we're putting in place to support them are good for all students. And, you know, that we need to think about what are just best practices for our kids. And so not to necessarily separate them out. You know, I think that we have really come into an age where there's definitely different needs, but to say that there's more needs, I don't know that that's necessarily true. And what can we do that's really good for all of our kids, regardless of the backgrounds that they're coming in with?
Yeah, and just briefly, if you think about what is the purpose of the accommodations, be that there are more that are being discovered and things like that. The processes where those things are to install those pieces are there and well followed. But what is the purpose of that? And I think for me is to keep in mind it's the level the playing field mentality to make sure that all students are receiving that fair shot, and that will continue to flow up, let's say at the college level. But maybe something that would help that would be, maybe better communication between, let's say, our CSE department and colleges. I don't know how much of that actually happens. Maybe it's happening more than I know about, but, the needs are still going to be there. A lot of those things may change rapidly anyway. And I think the thing to keep in mind there is, what is the purpose, with the goal being at the end, when we get to the end of the 12th grade year, and in a lot of cases, we are working towards them being, less reliant. I don't know if that's the right word on having those accommodations there in any case, but in many cases, that's something that will follow them, and we got to be cognizant of those things. So.
Again, I do think that we're identifying needs more quickly. They've always been at colleges and universities. To presume that we would lower standards because more students need accommodations is a gross misrepresentation of what education means, in my opinion. You maintain high standards for all students, and you level the playing field so everyone has access to the curriculum. So if you have a student who's visually impaired and they're in a biology class, how are you going to provide the supports for them to be able to access the biology curriculum? That's just that's number one, it's a federal mandate, but it's also a good human being and good teaching practices. As Morgan said, it's what are good teaching practices? Are we just teaching to the test? Are we just teaching to the 3 audience members that were like us and like hearing a lecture? Or are we trying to make things accessible? And if a student needs more time to write a paper, they need more time to write a paper. And how are we going to help them become a better writer? Or are we going to be stuck on the fact that got to wait another 2 days for the student to turn in the assignment? I want to get my grades done. The student needs more time to do the paper. What services are you providing? Are you giving feedback, or are you just putting a grade on their test? Are you providing the supports of giving them the feedback of make sure that you're working on run-on sentences? Maybe you should go to the writing center. How can I help you be a better writer? It's not about lowering standards. It's helping to make sure that everybody leaves here as a educationally sound, critical thinker. Because as Pete said, the jobs that we're preparing them for don't even exist yet.
I agree. I think that a lot of students who receive these services and who need our help that we support and that we give this extra time and extended time to in high school, we know what they need. We're there. And then all of a sudden graduation comes and we send them off, right? So there has to be this bridge that we can discuss and we can assist those kids, because you have great students coming into schools that don't know what help is available, don't know where to find it, and they fall off, the ledge. They're done. They can't be here. They can't be successful because they lost that family, that pack, that support that they always need, the people, their support system that they knew they could go to for the help. And so I think very much when they arrive here, they have to know who's going to help. They have to know, to sit down with their instructors, their professors, to say, this is what I need. How can we provide it? If somebody said, oh, well, there's deadlines and there's deadlines. Yes, there's deadlines all over the place. But if I was held to all the things that I needed to do in a day that I needed to send in, but I would not be employed. Like kids are working hard, and like, that isn't going to, I need extra time. Okay. You can have that extra time. I need to sit down. Can I sit down and talk through this with you? Can I sit down with somebody? Did you see that kid's notes? Do you think you could help me talk to that kid so like I could have notes like that? It's really easy, basic things that is the hurdle help that a kid needs to then be successfully employed. Like, this can't be the stopping point because you need this and you need that. You're too needy. You're done. You'll never be successful. That's not a true statement.
Thank you so much. And Morgan, I like your emphasis on how universal design for learning benefits. That's all. I appreciate that. Hey, we've got remaining time now. John can come around with the mic if you'd like to ask our panelists anything or follow up on any of the topics. We'd love to hear from you folks.
While I slow walk the microphone a couple of feet, I do want to announce that next week's Bergren Forum will be Alfred's own Associate Professor of Mathematics, Simon Romero, and he's going to be talking about beyond Monopoly, what can we learn from modern board games?
Thank you all for your presentation today. I thought it was very interesting. I had two questions. Number one, is there any digital literacy included in any of your districts around phones, the internet, parsing information, understanding where it comes from, who makes it, who owns it, et cetera, critically examining these things? And then two, are the days of rote, stock public education over? Are we moving into a paradigm where individual students have a public school education that's tailored directly to them? Okay, as far with the first question, I'll handle that one kind of quick, and then handle the second one. So digital literacy, New York State is actually coming out with an entire kind of pushing us to go a little further with digital citizenship and literacy and a whole plethora of things. And being a fairly new principal, I've got to even do some work on getting really good at understanding all that. Some of it's a little bit hot off the presses. It's something that we're working on. And I think even though there may not be fully in place, widespread issues, it happens kind of naturally in the day-to-day business. We are, every day we talk to a student who's having some type of a problem. And I guess I'm going more digital citizenship than digital literacy, because I think that from what we see with students that are really struggling, that's probably a bigger way to think about it. And those things do happen. I know we talk to teachers about having conversations and using their own, teachable moments on those types of things as well. And it's kind of like a lot of things, and anybody can correct me if I'm wrong. It's just trailing behind a lot of other things that happen in education. In terms of which way education is shifting, the second thing you said is absolutely correct, where the need to shift education in general to a more student-centered, individualized thing is absolutely where we're going. Both in my leadership classes that I had taken to get to where I'm at now, that was the biggest crux of the whole program, and heavily respected as the way to go. So, it's folks that are still putting them in the lines and the rows and columns and doing the lecture. The kids that works for is decreasing every year. and doing a lot more with talking to kids and relating what you're teaching them. Yes, there is content, and yes, there are requirements and curriculum things that come from the state. New York State has done a pretty good job of keeping us in those guardrails, which has helped us on some of those past questions we talked about. But what you do and how you get to those things, you have a lot of flexibility on. And if you can use something that the kid cares about, and talk to them, what do you like? Especially students that are harder to get engaged, they will light up. And once you got them, you got them. And that doesn't matter. You could be talking about a third grader or a sophomore in college. If you got that connection with them and something they care about, the content will follow. You can't go the other way these days. It's just not going to work that way. I don't know what we're doing here. Do you want to do another question or just more responses?
Digital literacy is taught, and digital citizen is taught in all grade levels. It's part of the library and media specialist standards and position. We have a 7th grade class on digital literacy, computer literacies. In terms of rote, if you go into a business, there's very few just rows. You work in teams and things like that. So if we're going to actually prepare them for the workforce, we actually have to help them learn how to work in groups.
Yeah, real quick to your change in model aspect of that question. The Board of Regents is going to be acting on formalizing regulations around both virtual and hybrid instruction very soon, very quickly. I would contend that that's a move in the direction of individualized educational models. The Blue Ribbon Commission that recently concluded their reports to New York State and the Board of Regents, also their recommendations were largely focused on multiple pathways and individualized pathways to demonstrate proficiency and advance towards graduation. So you have those two things in the regulatory or the NICED range. And then the other thing that I would really urge people to consider is that as early as July this past year, the comptroller's report, right, was projecting a 36.4 billion shortfall in the current economic plan. There's going to be some real economic truths that are going to force education's hand in terms of change of model as well, because it's an avenue to reduce costs by reducing overhead.
I think the one thing I've not heard today is the role of parents in all of this, that education begins way before they get to you, way before kindergarten. And we're forgetting that parents are the ones who might teach their kids about not being digital all the time, and that sitting down and reading a book, which cannot be lost, maybe sitting down and playing math games, which cannot be lost. How can you educate the parents of the students coming into your class to make your lives easier and our lives easier?
I think our communication with parents has changed a lot. I think that I think we saw a shift regarding the view of teachers and the role of classrooms during COVID, when everybody had to teach their own children, and then the reverse happened, so there's this back and forth thing. And I think that the way we communicate with parents has changed a lot just by the mode of communication. I know a lot of schools are using like Remind as an app, and parents are turning to Facebook for updates. And then there's this kind of behind the scenes battle over, what should districts post on Facebook and what should be on the website, and just trying to really figure out the best way to communicate with parents, because I think that all of us would agree that communication with parents is very easy at the elementary levels. It's very intuitive. Parents are very involved. And then as they get older, it's really hard to get those parents into the building. And I think that we are noticing more resources popping up. I know in Hornell, we have a very strong family resource center that does a lot of things with our families. And a lot of it's just education. There are so many things out there for our families, but a lot of them don't know about it. And so it's really communicating what's out there. And really, what I think the hardest thing is just picking up the phone. I know that it's hard to pick up that phone, and it's easier to send an email, and just opening up those lines of communication with our families and making them feel welcome in our buildings. And I think that I know at Hornell, that's what we're really looking at, is we shut our buildings down. We told everybody you can't come in, and it took us a long time to open those doors back up and say, no, we want you here, because it is a partnership. And, I think that while we want every parent to sit down with their child and read a book and play board games, that's not happening in every home. And so we also have to realize sometimes we can only focus on the time we have with them and make that the most meaningful time.
I think that the parents' work hours, they have to work. They have to work to provide for their families. And so we have students walking through our doors at sometimes 7:15 a.m., starts at 7:30, school all day, tutoring afterwards, and after school program till almost 5:30. And then a ride home, right? So they have to provide for their family, but the time that we have those kids is becoming more and more and more of, we're providing that service for them. So, I mean, the struggle to be able to provide for your family and the time you even get to spend with your children, for some families is really limited. So it makes it really hard. So we do try to provide a lot of those opportunities in our other programs to be able to play those games, to be able to read those books. I mean, I think we all got book vending machines and things. The kids are eating those up, they do their stuff in ELA, or they do well in class and they get that token. They're there. They're wanting to do that, gamification in board games without the cell phones in our districts. That's been kind of a new change that has been something that has been wonderful. The kids are playing cards. They're playing chess during lunch. So we are kind of shifting some things back to get off this technology. But as far as, parent involvement, we have very good parent involvement, but we also understand that they're also doing the best they can for their families. And sometimes those times just don't work out.
You want to be mindful of the time. We have 2 more people who want to ask questions. It's a little bit after 1. If people need to go, of course, we'll have other schedules. If you want to come up and ask the questions, that also, I think, can work if the 2 people who have questions have time.
And if you're one of my foundation students, would you give your name to Kathy Sherman back in the back so I can know you were here? Thank you.
Hey, on that topic of parent involvement, parent partnership, if we wanted to get serious about improving educational outcomes at the local, state, or national level, we would max out on resources from birth to age 5. And we would make sure that we were actively providing the materials and the education to eliminate the disparity in language and concept exposure that occurs along certain lines in those formative years.
So my mom is a first grade teacher. And as I'm sure that all of us who have any experience with education know, the point of school is not only to learn your fundamentals of math, science, history, et cetera, but to socialize the next generation. And with so many students having missed out on those formative years of socialization, that job of allowing people to learn how to act in society now shifts to upper level teachers who normally don't have to deal with the problems that they will very soon be facing. So my question is, how do you as administrators and your districts broadly plan to provide support to the teachers as they inevitably have to take on roles that they've never expected and work that is significantly more than they've had in the past?
That's a really solid question. As a high school principal, so real quick, things that we've done, right? We've gotten really tight on what our common behavioral expectations are. We've defined those. We use a common language, a common set of terms. And then you coach your teachers who are not used to doing this on how to have those conversations with kids and with parents. And then the second part of this answer is just give grace. Give grace to your teachers, give grace to your students, and license your teachers and your staff to give grace to students and parents too, right? We're going to do a lot better if we presume best intentions, and we're going to do a lot better if we adopt a model of, hey, let me show you what I'm looking for and reinforce you when you give that to me, rather than let me tell you all the 99 things I don't want you to do and the painful ways I'm going to punish you when you do them.
I agree. I think sometimes it's that same assumption that we assume they know how to behave in certain situations. And as they get older, we still forget that they're still children. And so, I joke with our other principals, because we have three schools in our district, that the discipline we deal with and the way we deal with it truly isn't that much different than you would a young kid. I find myself often turning to kids and just asking, are you being kind? That's like that. I say that all the time. Was it kind? No. Okay. All right. Let's go from there. Just those little things like make eye contact when you're talking to your teachers, explain what you're doing, explain why you acted that way. And we can find that common ground. And I think Pete's right. You have to find grace, and every kid's different. So we try not to paint with a wide brush, but in the places where we can be consistent and use common language and use common expectations, that's the best way to handle it, because they're still students and they're still learning.
Something we've done to kind of that targets this pretty nicely is just to add to what they're saying is in addition to be kind and give grace, is the concept of really driving home empathy and a restorative practice approach to problem solving. Not just that it happens with us in the offices, but to through several rounds of training, so that we can empower teachers to have those tools to just what prompts, what questions do you ask a student, how do you approach this with them to get a student to actually reflect on, was this kind? And we've done that consistently with every teacher that we have in the building, and we run refreshers on every year for the new ones, because there's always a little bit of turnover that come and go and things like that. And that's I think it's helped tremendously, and I can see that, because then when we have a student come in and talk to them about problems, it's clear from the way they're responding to us that is happening. We're not there yet. There's a whole continuum of how much you can go into something like that, all the way to full restorative justice practices. I don't know if anybody on stage is at a level like that or ever will get there. So yeah, we have codes of conduct and general expectations, and there are some no-goes with behaviors, but getting a kid to empathize is going to be, or a teacher, how to teach that practice is going to be your key to getting students being nicer and being more kind, and teachers giving grace and all those things.
It's taking advantage of the teachable moments. So yesterday, having a conversation with a teacher, and a student was literally right here and saying, remember, we talked about personal space. I'm having an adult conversation that you're not a part of. Oh yeah. I have to back up. It's just those reminders of, here's what general public purpose is. Let's be good, and let's be kind, and take a step back, wait your turn. It's going to happen. We'll talk to you.
The return of play. We don't give our kids enough time. We are so structured to get from point A to B that if I think of when I was in kindergarten, I can tell you, man, there was a wooden playhouse. There was all sorts of amazing things. I was cooking up a storm with my, wooden vegetables and doing all of these things. Our kids now, if you walk into a kindergarten room, if you walk into a first grade room, some of those structures are set to like, you are little people, you will sit here for 80 minutes straight. We are doing math. We are doing ELA. You might have a little snack. Then we're going to go to the cafeteria. Like, they have a busier schedule than any of us this day. And to remind, our teachers, like, breathe. You learned to socialize because you learned that Joey might have wanted the truck you were playing with, and he might have been a little aggressive trying to take it from you, but we worked it out, right? Those things start early. If you take away the playground time, if you take away the opportunity during the day to step away from focus, because the biggest thing that they're going to learn from is the free time to socialize with each other, is the time to have fun. If kids are walking out of buildings right now, or walking out of this university now, to say that at no point during their educational experience today that they could say something was fun, we are going about it backwards. It's the same thing to go like, would nap time for high schoolers be a positive thing? Probably. Do we have time in the day? No. So, if we can't do that, let's go back to providing opportunities for play. Fourth graders, they're babies, let them play. Fifth graders, sixth graders, like, they have to have that opportunity to explore themselves, to explore the people around them, and to find their people and how they react in certain situations. Because what we see now is there's a problem. I don't know how to handle it. I have no coping mechanisms, and like, it goes off. It's because we took playtime and socializing away. Even at lunchtime, you sit in your spot, good eating, come on, like, back down. Everybody take a breath, bring back the fun.
I'm just gonna real quick, for any of you that may be, going out for like an elementary education role, too often does taking that playtime that may be there end up being the first thing that gets taken away as a consequence if a student is struggling in some way. Please don't do that. There's other ways to handle that. Don't take away the thing that they need the most in order to, that's a bad.
One last question back here.
Mine just has to do with like the retention rate. So as a marketing student and intern, we're always trying to combat this. And I was just curious what your guys' strategy was to combat that situation.
Are you talking in terms of retention in employment or student retention
Just
of?
student retention of like capturing their attention
that-
throughout like the whole time they're in class, or the best that you can.
And yeah, Pete said engagement and in most any of the things you have heard up here with, connecting with their interests. If they're engaged in it, it'll have a better chance of staying there than if it's there because, they're made to do it. If it's compliance based, it's not going to be retained for very long. That's true for adults as well. If it's engagement and interest based, it will be retained much longer. New teachers don't have a toolbox that has a whole lot of tools to do that. So talk to colleagues, talk to mentors as teachers become more veteran, that toolbox is expanded and you get better and better at those things. But that's kind of it in a nutshell. We could probably hammer this one for 5 or 10 more minutes, but I'll pass it if anybody wants to add a thought.
Your engaged students have a relationship with their instructor. I think that we have some, if you're going into teaching because you think you really like a content area, I would remind you that it's not about the content, it's about your people skills. You have to have strong people skills because you're there not to make friends with students, and students don't need to be friends with their teachers, but they need to feel a connection. And I'm sure that everybody in this room can look back on their favorite teachers. It's because they liked them. There's something about them that drew them in and engaged them. And that engagement starts with having a relationship with the teacher. And so I think that that's, at least for me, I can look back on my classes that I enjoyed the most. It's because I liked that teacher and how they taught, and to not forget that piece, because that's huge. And that goes back to the same thing with the kind of discipline and the behaviors in the classroom. You'll find the classrooms where the teachers actively try to create a relationship with the students, those classroom management problems go away because the kids are engaged.
I want to thank everybody for coming today, especially our guests for doing this for us today. I feel like this went very, very well. You 5 had no way of knowing this is the first one of these that I've ever been the one organizing, and you have simultaneously filled me with gratitude and kind of dread, because it could only go downhill from here, because you all did a truly wonderful job, and I appreciate that. Thank you very much. If there are any lingering questions, feel free to come on up for anybody who has time to be able to stay.